Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another CEO Table Talk. My name is JT O'Donnell. I'm the founder and CEO of Work It Daily, and I am the host today. We are going to be talking about how CEOs can spot their biggest leadership weakness. And you know that I'm very lucky because I have 3 Vistage Chairs. These are CEO chairs. They are individuals who coach CEOs on a daily basis, which means they can spot their CEO's weaknesses pretty darn fast. So there's no hiding here, and I think they're going to provide some fantastic insights. So we want to dive right into it. Hello, Kirsten. Hello, Mark. Hello, Mike. How are y'all doing today? Good?
Wonderful.
Doing great. How are you?
Good to have you here. Yeah, I'm excited about this because all of you run these groups where you have 10, 15 or more CEOs in a room being, sharing their thoughts, their vulnerabilities, talking about the fact that, it's a lonely job to be a CEO and having to identify their weaknesses, which I think is not always easy for a leader. It's not, you try to be perfect. You want to be invincible, but you do need to see those blind spots. So let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to pick on you first, Mike, then bounce over to Mark and then to Kirsten.
All right. Very timely. I had a call this morning with a CEO on this very topic, so it's very interesting. So I think the first one is I call it unstructured, sort of the self-reflection assessment. I think all of us know there are times when we realize, boy, I'm always getting in my own way on this. And so just having that time to reflect and to stop avoiding what you know keeps coming up for you. The CEO this morning said he does this because he sits next to his CFO in his meetings, and when he feels like he needs to say something and probably shouldn't, he has his CEO grab him by the leg and squeeze his leg. He literally told me this morning. That's how he avoids getting into trouble with himself, because he's got some weaknesses and saying things in the wrong way at the wrong time. So kind of an interesting way to get at it, but it works for him. And that's just one way to kind of have that unstructured, reflective moments in your time. The second one, I think, is around this executive coaching idea, or even if it's therapy or whatever, some sort of structured way to help you sort of unravel what it is that causes you to have these blind spots when you're leading. And I found that, obviously as a Vistage Chair, we deal with this a lot, but it's been very helpful. And I think the CEOs would say the same thing when they can be in the room with other people and realize, okay, I appreciate you letting me know that. And they feel very, very comfortable knowing other CEOs have some of the same challenges. So a structured, whether it's coaching, therapy, whatever, would be the second. And the third one is, and I think this is one that's probably as important as the other two, if not more, some sort of metrics. And I don't always mean financial metrics. I mean, just insights. If you're experiencing a lot of employee turnover, if morale seems to be way off, or your team's not working well together, patterns of issues that are cropping up that you're seeing a lot of, it's time to dig in and really understand what's going there. Would be the third one to uncover what is it that may be something you're driving that's causing the leadership team to be off, or the organization to have some morale issues. Would be the 3 that I would spend time, and just always thinking about what is the mindset I need, what's the skill set that's missing or not missing, and what are the tool sets I need to bring to the table to make sure that I'm bringing my best self to work every day.
Love it. I love that you have that framework. Mark, I got to ask you a question. Of Vistage, you've been with Vistage how many years now? How many CEOs do you think you've coached over all those years?
Oh, a couple hundred, probably, something like that. Yes, and we all have the weaknesses.
And so it's easier to spot in others than yourself, right? So what are your thoughts on this? How can people spot it in themselves? What can they do?
I think that they have to create the culture to allow others to help them. Emotional intelligence and self-awareness, it's a great characteristic of some CEOs, and it can make it easy. But even the most self-aware individuals need to look to others for help. And, of course, the problem is when you're the CEO, people defer to power. And that's a costly mistake in an organization. Whether you're hiring employees or consultants, they're going to withhold the feedback. And that's tough. So creating the culture, I think, is critically important. A culture where feedback is the norm. You need to model feedback, both positive and negative, in the organization, so they can learn to provide the feedback 360 degrees. You know, there's a saying, praise in public, criticize in private, and it's exactly wrong. Criticize has got a negative connotation, but criticize is just another way of a negative feedback, or please do this better. And companies and people need to learn how to do it in public. They need to celebrate failures. They need to talk about weaknesses. And when you've got the culture, then I think you can fix it.
It's amazing that you talk about that, because I think that is not an easy thing to build, right? It takes a lot of intention to build a culture like that, but the results are phenomenal when you do. Speaking of which, jumping over to you, Kirsten, you and I recently had a very in-depth conversation about CEO isolation.
Yes.
And the fact that, you know, there's nobody they can talk to, which I think can contribute to the inability to see your weaknesses, right? So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, sure. So I have kind of a funny little mindset here. I have a 3M policy, and it has nothing to do with Post-its. My 3M policy comes from the standpoint that I think it involves 3 things. 1, mindset. 2, mentoring, and 3, measurement. So a little bit of repeat for a couple of things that Mike and Mark have said, which I think just emphasizes how important some of these elements are. But armed with these 3 M's, a leader can spot and correct all of their biggest weaknesses. So the first M is mindset. A leader who desires to practice leadership, which is all at the highest level, must cultivate a mindset of humility. We hear a lot about humility. We hear a lot about vulnerability these days, and I think for a good reason. The leader who understands that they're not perfect, that they might lack key skills or knowledge in certain situations, or just downright be fallible, make a mistake. I think this is the leader that people are willing to follow. I think this type of leader, to Mark's point, is going to get honest feedback. They're going to engender a positive and authentic relationship with people who are going to be willing to give them that criticism or that just honest feedback about, hey, let's try this differently next time, right? The second M is mentoring. Any person who wants to become a leader or become a better leader needs to spend time with people who are further down that path. So this could be mentoring, this could be coaching, this could be a peer group, of course. Right? Placing yourself in the position of getting advice, challenge, encouragement, perspective is going to go a long way to finding out what those gaps are and closing those performance gaps. And our third M is measurement. Mike talked about this. In my perspective, measurement is taking the form of either formal or informal, but valid instruments designed to give you objective feedback about your skills, your preferences, your image, or your performance in some way. And we have so many choices out there. I think we have to be very careful consumers. There are many tools out there to measure leadership and performance that have a lot of great face validity, but really no substance. But I do firmly believe that if we want to change something, we do have to measure it. So these are my 3 M's: mindset, mentoring, and measurement. And I think those are how leaders find their weaknesses and change them.
I love it. Okay, so here's the follow-up question. You do the things that you've all talked about, and you have staff who gives you critical feedback on your weaknesses. But some staff really aren't well equipped to analyze you, right? They may not be good at giving that feedback. They may be giving you feedback based on their limited knowledge without understanding the bigger picture or the business model. How does a CEO take in feedback about a weakness and determine whether or not it's accurate and if they should address it? What are some thoughts around that? Anybody have any experience with that, where they've had a CEO in their group get some feedback and they weren't sure it was valid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kristen, I'll start with you. Let's go back
Sure.
that way.
Yeah, and I also got some myself, right? We certainly would get these kind of things ourselves. First, I would ask for good examples, right? Real specific examples, so I could put myself back into that situation or moment, so I could figure out sort of where they were coming from. Second, I would take that information and I would just go and test it, right? I would go and try to get a few more pieces of data from people that I trust. And that would just help me kind of test the hypothesis that that person gave me, but I would certainly first and foremost thank them, consider it to be real and valid in the moment, and then go and use it in some way. So go and get either some backup information, some more information, and see if I could validate it in some way. But first thank them because they did the hard thing first, right? Which is give you the feedback.
Yeah.
That's what
I love that. I love it. At least, but we're not assuming that just because they gave it to us, it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, Mark, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the pattern recognition is exactly the right. You are going to get feedback. You get feedback from customers. When I was trying to raise money, if you go knock on enough doors and they say the same thing over and over again, you have a problem. You have a weakness, and I heard that. I was working with one of my CEOs, and for about 6 months, I was being fairly direct with him, and he didn't hear me. And month after month, I would say the same thing. And then about month 7, he said he realized what his weakness was. He was being a little too judgmental of other people. Oh, yeah.
There you go. Keep going, my friend. We had a little technical difficulty.
No worries. And he realized it, and I asked him, should I have been even more direct? And his comment was no, that you need to slowly peel the onion, and eventually the CEO will hear it. And that's the pattern recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So going right at it, it wasn't going to work. It was going to take some time for them to recognize. I can see that. That's really interesting.
Heck, I'm 65 years old, and I finally realized I'm a control freak, and it's been a weakness my entire life. Of course, my wife just laughed when I said it, but
but the fact is you realized it. It's never too late.
Right. Onward and upward. That's right.
Yeah. Mike, what do you think?
I've actually experienced this, and I think the leader themselves should demonstrate their interest. And I always say, I need help are the 3 most powerful words other than I love you. And if you just say, look, I need some help, I'm observing, a situation that continue occurs, whatever that situation is, and the behavior that you're observing from the team is X, and the impact on you is Y, and you're trying to understand what the intention is, why people aren't responding or why people aren't doing what you need them to go do, whatever. And if you create that, I don't think you can ever create, I've heard this psychological safety idea a lot, and I've had people that are experts in the space say you really can't create true psychological safety because there's a hierarchy. So you're always going to have someone who's got power over you. So the better concept is creating a courageous space so that people are willing to share and talk about this stuff. And I think if you demonstrate, I need help, and you produce the situation, this is very important. SBI feedback is what it's called, with an intention at the end, trying to get better. I think people will start sharing stuff. And it's not your job to judge whether they really know what's going on. You just say, thank you for the feedback. It does inform you about how well informed your leadership team is, how well equipped they are to answer your question, JT. So don't take it as, well, they don't really know what's going on. They don't know all the details. Just absorb it. And then when you spend time in your one-on-ones, you can start to uncover more and more and share more of them so they are more informed. So when they give you feedback, it can be more effective. But I think the first thing is just identifying yourself. I need some help. Here's a situation I'm observing. Here's the behavior that's coming out of this. And here's the impact on me or the organization. And I'm trying to understand the intent. I think if you're creating that sort of courageous space, you will start to slowly but surely get that kind of feedback you want. And if you don't get in that group session, don't get alarmed. I think you'll find your one-on-ones, people will start sharing things with you. And you'll find the 1 or 2 leaders who are really courageous, that are really good, will give you the feedback individually. That'll then help you in the next group session to have another dialogue about it, and just be patient with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. This isn't something that you just institute and it's,
Right.
implement and it's fine. All right, now let's talk about the leaders. And I want y'all to think about this a bit. They know they have a weakness. They've acknowledged they have the weakness, and they keep doing it.
Yeah.
We all have those. We all know the CEO we're talking about. Every single one of you right now, somebody came to mind.
We might have been that CEO.
So first of all, my question is, why does that happen?
Yeah.
Why do CEOs who flat out know they have a weakness continue to allow it? And what normally has to happen for to get critical enough that they finally, address it or fix it? Anybody want to dive in there? Mark, you're nodding first. I'm going to you.
Wow. When I joined Vistage, I had a vice president who was extremely powerful and talented, and I did not have the capability of coaching or mentoring him, coaching him, managing him. And I would go back month after month to this Vistage meeting and complain. And finally, one of the members just leaned across the table and I should say it. He said, "Mark, if you complain about this staff member, this vice president, and you don't do anything about it, I'm going to walk out of the room." He said something a little bit more powerful than that, and it was fear. And I solved the specific problem based on how much that other CEO cared about me and said, "Mark, just do it." But it was the fear that prevented me from that specific instance. I got over the one instance, but you have to undo a lifetime of your defense mechanisms. And for me, it was pleasing people. And it's hard work, but it is the most valuable work you can do.
Yeah, that is incredible. I mean, does it really take somebody to kind of just love in your face, right? And be like, enough already. You've got to do something.
Yeah.
I would say if you're not in an organization like Mark was describing in a Vistage meeting where a CEO calls you out, the other way is you have someone in your leadership team. And I had this, somebody, I was getting very frustrated and so on. And I finally was asked by someone, said, "Mike, what do you think it is? Like, what are the situations that cause you to be frustrated?" And I said, "I don't know. I just can't get this done, that done." What I uncovered, though, was when I get really, really tired, I'm very ineffective as a leader. And she was the one. I said, "Look, when we go to meetings, can you just observe what's going on and give me feedback after so we can kind of figure out what it is?" And that's what we figured out. She's like, "Okay, I noticed it in this meeting, but not this one. Today you were fine, notice over here." And I started saying, "Okay, I think because I'm tired." And that was the ultimate answer, was when I'm very tired, I'm very ineffective. So we created a scenario where if I was tired in a meeting and she was in that meeting, I would give her a hand signal. And she would say to the team, she was my vice president of marketing, she would say, "Okay, I think, Mike, this is a big decision. Would it be easier if you had time to think about this overnight or for the rest of the afternoon, whatever the timing of the meeting was, to give us a better answer, more direction, more clarity?" And I would say, "Yeah, that would be great." And even though at times the team really wanted to leave there and get things done, she really helped me recognize that it was when I'm tired is when I'm making poor decisions. And that was a weakness because it came across in how I behaved or treated people or whatever. But it took me saying, "Hey, can you, while you're sitting in these meetings, you're in a lot of them with me, make some observations and keep me honest with what's going on?" And I started to process it myself and realized it came down to being tired was the obstacle that was getting in my way. And once that was uncovered, it unlocked a lot.
Interesting. You invited an accountability, right?
Yeah,
Having her be
accountable. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. Kirsten, you're nodding your head. You dealt with this too.
Yeah. People do what they do because of what happens to them when they do it. And so what I have found is that when leaders continually behave in unhelpful or unhealthy ways, it's working for them, right? So it may be a blind spot or it may not be working for the people around them, but for them, the leader, it's working for them. And what I found is we have to put that leader in touch with the negative side effects of the behavior that is challenging. Why do they need to change? Well, they don't know because they're not seeing the downstream effects of the thing that they're doing, right? So Mike, you were frustrated in that meeting. Why was that bad for the other people around that table? So we have to put the leader in touch with what is happening for the people around you when in that meeting you're shutting people down or you're not allowing creativity or you're talking over people, whatever those things are. And those are kind of simple examples, but they really affect a way a team can behave. And once the leader can see what those consequences are, and they can say, well, what's more important to me, right? Hearing my own voice or getting what I need out of the people around the table, building those relationships, and then building in like the cues that you talked about, Mike, somebody being able to be a partner for you in that meeting. I've also done that. I've brought in somebody that said, look, this is the thing I'm working on. I need you to be my partner. You can also declare it to the whole team, right?
Yeah.
That's a great act of vulnerability to your whole team. I know I talk at every agenda item and I don't mean to. Help me with that, right? So just declare it to the whole team, right? So I think putting leaders in touch with the consequences of their actions and asking them what's more important to them. Where do you really want your effect to be? And how do we get there, and including them some support of your team members.
I love that. This is such
I-
great. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think that if the passion for the goal is so strong
Yeah.
That's good.
that the pain and agony you have to go through to get past your weaknesses, that's what it is. And if you work for a CEO who you know they have the passion for the goal, offer them the help.
Right.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Here's a powerful question from Michael in the audience. What actions can a CEO take to address concerns, I would say fears, about team members potentially using their weakness against them? Now, I've seen that happen, right? Now you're talking about unhealthy relationships where certain people on the team have figured out how to use the weakness, right, of that CEO against them. Thoughts on that? How do you deal with that?
Get rid of the team member.
And it's so interesting because usually it's a codependent relationship, don't you think? Usually the CEO has become so dependent on that person that they don't want to remove them, and yet they're completely leveraging it. At least that's how I've always seen it.
If that's something that's actually happening on your top team and you know it, why are you tolerating it?
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think you can do to get other team members? I think sometimes people are just afraid to even mention that that's an unhealthy relationship, right? Coming back to that safe space. Mike, I love what you commented on. We talk about psychological safety all the time, but it is truly difficult to achieve in a hierarchical system. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. If I might add, Michael's question is really good, and Kirsten's answer is absolutely perfect. There is one other answer, and that is you, the employee, you don't belong at that company. That you're better than that.
Yeah.
And that if that behavior exists and it isn't fixed, there are alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had this happen. A CEO of mine had a couple of his key team members, because one of the things he struggles with is dealing with conflict, and he's got a fair amount of it, and so he doesn't tackle it and ends up showing up sometimes. And he's got a couple of people on his leadership team that are into power, and so they got into a conversation with a supplier, and they went at it on the call with the supplier, which he was humiliated by it. But he was the cause of it because he hadn't dealt with it, and they were taking advantage of his weakness, and it just showed up in a very unfortunate situation. But in his case, we talked it through, and sort of, he's got very strong cultural values. He's got very strong kind of in how his whole company operates, what his expectations are, what's norms. And so we just talked it through for him and just had a conversation. Again, SBI feedback I really like. But he said, here's the situation I observe, here's the behavior, and here's the impact on me. It doesn't meet the cultural values we have, the norms, totally unacceptable. Right. And the two team members they felt horrible in there because they respected the CEO, but they realized they were leveraging his weakness of not addressing stuff, and it showed up in a very, very bad way. For him, it was a great opportunity to realize, okay, this is a bigger deal. Sometimes we have to have crises before we tackle our weaknesses. So for him, it was an opportunity to say, okay, now I understand why this is so impactful. Back to what Kirsten was saying, or Mark, I forget about your employees. You really got what's the impact on them? You may think, hey, I got to get this done, but the employee impact downstream. This was a great example where he's like, okay, now I get it. And the two employees like, wow, I didn't realize how bad this has gotten to a point, because they were letting this thing escalate, and it just exploded. But he went back to, what are the cultural norms? How does this company operate? What's appropriate in this company? And then when it doesn't get that way, he had to deal with it.
Interesting. Let me ask you all this. So if you're a CEO and you're realizing that you have a massive dependence on one particular senior player, like one particular person, massive to the point that you've caught yourself letting something slide here, not letting your, it's a weakness, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's like, and how much of the time do you end up identifying that in your Vistage groups?
Yeah, and I'm also wondering if it's a personal issue, right? Like it's not necessarily I depend on them business wise, but is there something missing relationship wise
Yeah,
for the person?
absolutely.
We
Yeah.
had an employee that was, when I took over the company, was assumed that her role was a manufacturing company and she was production planning and all this. And it sounded very complex, the work she did. She didn't come to work every day. She had issues back to some personal stuff. It was a million things going on. But everyone's like, oh my God, we can't do anything about it because without her, we're sunk.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I did was I said, look, I'd like to better understand how this whole process works. Because we had breakdowns left and right. It wasn't operating efficiently. And when I did all that and started, mapping out the whole process, I realized there were 2 or 3 other people that were part of the process that had a really good handle on most of what was going on. And I thought, okay, am I really soul dependent here, or am I just thinking I am because she's demonstrated that she's got control and everyone else is just serving because she was very difficult to deal with. She would just lash out at people. And I came to the realization that were 2 people that probably could help me navigate whatever it was that she was super skilled at, and we could work our way through it. And the downstream implications of her behavior and workflow issues, those people rose up and were able to say, okay, enough of this, either you change or you're done. So you have to understand the whole journey. I can't believe somebody is that critical if they're causing that many issues that you can't find people that could come in there and jump in there to help out, because everybody's seeing it.
Yeah, 100%. All right. I want to just ask you all. So again, folks, I'm so lucky to have 3 very accomplished Vistage chairs with us. They all run private CEO groups where the CEOs come together on a monthly basis, as well as work with these CEOs one-on-one. I'd love for you all, the Vistage model is truly unique. And I know that all 3 of you believe in it deeply, and rightfully so, because you get incredible results. How does this particular model help a CEO not only identify the weakness, but work through it at a faster rate? How do you think this is different than them, out there doing it on their own? Mark, can I pick on you to go first?
Yeah, I think that if it's there's an intolerance in the group of inaction,
Complacency. Yeah.
complacency, and when you get within 6 months, 9 months, you've been exposed. They know who you are. And they're all high-powered, fast-moving people, and they'll be intolerant in a loving manner.
I love that. And you aspire. Is it safe to assume that if for the right reasons, if you're in there, you want to aspire to be their peers, right? So you don't want to come and deliver that. It's so interesting. One-on-one sessions, what are those like? How do those assist? Kirsten, what about you? Do you meet in person, online? How does that work?
Both.
Interesting.
Yeah, both. I would say they're all over the map. Some are, they are what is on fire, and others are a progression of, where we're working on this. Where are we on that? How is that showing up this month? What's the progress? So some people I think are making efforts in of verticals of leadership and their company's growth, and others are, got a handle on a baseline of things, but this is what's on my mind and I don't know, how to approach it, and I want to go deep on it, or this is where I'm a little confused, and I think it's important to be flexible and available and open to whatever they bring, because it's one meeting they don't set the agenda for. Yeah. Right. It's one place where they're not in charge, and they need to be completely open and safe. And that's important for them to have.
I love that. Mike.
I look at it this way. For me, is you've got 65 years of history of working with small, mid-sized business owners. So you got all this historical information, data, things that worked, didn't work over the years. You got 45,000 people around the world that are wrestling with all these kinds of things across all these different industries. And then you get 600-700 people like us that are doing the work, that have either lived in this world and we're facilitating this stuff. And so if you're a CEO and you're in a one-on-one conversation, we have all kinds of tools and resources and questions. I think the thing for me that's been fascinating is the questions that we have been trained, the things that the tools they give you. The CEOs I work with say, wow, no one's ever asked me the question that you're asking me, or no one's ever asked me in that way. I've never thought of it that way. For me, those are the most powerful things, because you start unlocking what's really underneath what's going on, whether it's in the group setting or the individuals. So I think the power of whatever network you're in is you just got so much information, and then the questions that we can ask people that they're not typically being asked, or people would be afraid to, really unlocks a lot of opportunity for them to grow personally and professionally, I find.
I love the way you said that. I just met with somebody today, and he's had a really amazing year, and said to me today, I don't think you realized the size of the knot that you helped me untie this year.
Good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, I wrote it down because I was like, wow.
Yeah.
That's really... And it was all mental too.
Yeah.
It was all, put up self-made roadblocks for this person. Incredibly successful in his own right, but roadblocks for where it could totally be in the next year. And it was profound.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. This is amazing. Okay, folks, just a reminder, all 3 of these Vistage chairs are on LinkedIn. Please find them. Please follow them. They're sharing a lot of very powerful information in their LinkedIn feeds. Better yet, reach out and ask them to connect. And if you're a CEO, or if you feel your CEO needs some coaching, I would strongly recommend you have them watch this particular session and invite them to connect with all 3 of these Vistage chairs. They're truly phenomenal. And I just want to thank all of you, given that we're just coming off of Thanksgiving after recording this, really grateful to have you here this year. The CEO Table Talk series has been phenomenal with your help. And I thank you so much for all of that.
Yeah.
And so, folks, until next time, remember, if you want to win, you got to work it daily. We'll see you at the next CEO Table Talk. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, JT.